Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ever wonder how buildings just seem to magically appear?
It's definitely not magic.
Well, today we're diving into the world of construction contracts, using excerpts from the Appropriate Contract Selection Guide by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. It's a UK-based organization, but don't worry, the insights apply globally. We'll equip you with the knowledge to navigate this world like a pro, no matter where you're building.
That's right. Think of it like learning the rules of a game. No matter where you play, the fundamentals stay the same.
Exactly. So let's talk strategy. The guide starts with procurement routes, choosing the right blueprint for your project. We'll break down each option, highlighting the strengths and weaknesses.
The first one up is the classic traditional approach, often called design bid build. Picture this. You hire an architect to design the project. Then, you put the construction out to bid and choose the contractor with the best offer. Sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it seems like a clear division of labor design, bid, build.
Exactly. This route usually uses a fixed price lump sum contract, meaning you agree on a set price up front. But, and this is important, variations can pop up.
Oh, I bet. Those unexpected surprises, maybe difficult soil conditions or last-minute client, changes those curveballs that make you reconsider your life choices.
You're spot on. Those variations can really throw a wrench in that fixed price plan.
So what other options are out there?
Well, the guide also highlights traditional remeasurement, sometimes called measure and value. Think of it like the pay-as-you-go option for your project. Instead of a fixed price, the final cost is determined by measuring the actual work done at the end.
So it offers a bit more flexibility for projects where the scope might evolve during construction. But what if you want a more streamlined approach, where the design and construction happen under one roof?
That's where design and build, or D&B, comes in your one-stop shop for your project. You'd hire a single contractor to handle both the design and construction.
That's got to be tempting. One point of contact, less back and forth. Where's the catch?
Well, imagine handing over the design reins entirely. You get that single point of responsibility, but you might sacrifice some control over the design specifics. Plus, comparing bids can be tricky since each contractor might have a different vision for the project.
So it's a trade-off streamlined process, but maybe less control over the finer details. Okay, let's talk about those mega projects, the ones that make headlines, huge developments or intricate infrastructure projects. The guide mentions construction management and management contracting. Are these just two sides of the same coin?
They do sound similar, but there's a distinct difference. In construction management, you bring in a dedicated project manager. They're like the orchestra conductor for your project to coordinate all the specialist trade contractors.
So instead of one main contractor, you've got a team of specialists all working together under the guidance of this conductor.
Precisely. It's about spreading the risk and bringing in specialized expertise. Now, management contracting is similar, but the management contractor actually wears two hats. They oversee all the subcontractors and manage the budget directly, often on a cost reimbursement basis.
So they're like the general contractor, but with a laser focus on keeping the finances in check.
You got it.
Okay. Now on to something I always find intriguing. Partnering. What's that all about?
Imagine a world where everyone involved in the project, the client, the contractor, the subcontractors, they're all working together towards a shared goal with open communication every step of the way. That's the essence of partnering. It's not tied to a specific procurement route, but a collaborative mindset that can be applied to any project.
Building relationships alongside those buildings. I like it. Okay, get ready for a jargon alert. Public-private partnerships, or PPPs. I've always found them to be a bit of a mystery.
They can seem complex. Essentially, it's a long-term collaboration between the public and private sectors, usually for those big infrastructure projects, things like hospitals or toll roads.
Right, I've heard of those. So the private sector finances, builds, and often even operates the project, while the public sector essentially leases it back over time.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about leveraging the efficiency and innovation of the private sector for those essential public projects.
Makes a lot of sense. The guide also mentions a whole bunch of other procurement routes. It's like a buffet of options.
Absolutely. You've got cost plus as contracts, which are lower risk for the contractor because they're reimbursed for all their costs plus an agreed upon fee.
Okay, so they're guaranteed to make their profit.
Precisely. Then there's target cost, where the client and contractor agree on a target price and then share any savings or overruns a true partnership.
Interesting. It's like incentivizing efficiency for everyone involved. What other routes should our listeners be aware of?
There are also term contracts. which are perfect for ongoing work like maintenance and framework agreements designed for multiple projects with a single contractor over a set period of time.
So it's about building a long-term relationship for a series of projects.
Exactly. And then there's alliancing, which takes collaboration to a whole new level, combining those partnering principles with target cost models, and get this, a no claim, no blame culture.
Wow, talk about building trust. That's a big one. What about EPC contracts? I hear that term thrown around a lot.
EPC stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. Think of it as the ultimate D&B package, commonly used for large-scale projects like power plants or those massive offshore wind farms.
So it's like hiring a one-stop shop for the entire project lifecycle, from the initial design all the way through to completion.
Exactly. Choosing the right procurement route is just the first step in the world of construction contracts.
It sounds like it. Each route has its own advantages, risks, and complexities. But don't worry, listeners, we're just getting started. In part 2 of this deep dive, we'll move beyond the what and into the how. We'll explore the practical considerations for choosing the right contract for your specific needs. Stick around, it's about to get even more interesting. Welcome back, everyone. We've explored all those different procurement roads, from the classic design bid build to the highly collaborative alliancing approach.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground.
We have. But now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How do you actually choose the right contract for your specific project? It's like picking the perfect spice blend, right? Each one brings its own flavor to the mix.
I like that analogy. The guide actually moves from the knowing level to the doing, providing us with a framework for making those informed decisions.
Okay, so what factors should we be considering as we're browsing our contract spice rack?
Well, first and foremost, consider the project itself. What are we building here? Is it a brand new building? A complex refurbishment? A simple renovation? The type and complexity of your project should really guide your contract choice.
So a simple bathroom remodel wouldn't necessarily require the same contractual firepower as, say, a skyscraper.
Exactly. And don't forget about the industry. Building a hospital comes with a whole other set of regulations and complexities compared to a new shopping mall.
Right, different industries, different needs, different contracts. What else should we be thinking about?
Size definitely matters. You don't want to bring a sledgehammer to a thumbtack fight, as they say.
Keep it lean, keep it clean. I like that.
The guide wisely points out the need for a proportionate contract. For a small, straightforward project, you can probably get away with a simpler contract. But a large, complex project that might need something a bit more robust, with all the bells and whistles.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about the client's experience level? Does that factor into this decision-making process?
Absolutely. A seasoned developer with a team of in-house experts is going to have very different needs and risk tolerance than, let's say, someone who's undertaking their first construction project ever.
Right. Someone just dipping their toes into the construction waters for the first time.
It's like the difference between a seasoned hiker tackling Mount Everest versus someone going for their first leisurely stroll in the park.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of risk, that seems like a constant companion in the world of construction. How does the contract itself play into managing those potential pitfalls?
The contract is like your safety net, outlining who takes responsibility if, and let's face it, when things go sideways.
Because we all know that in construction, it's not a matter of if, but when those surprises pop up.
Exactly. Remember D&B, where the contractor handles both design and construction. It's convenient, but it also shifts some of that risk onto the client. They have less control over those design details and might find it harder to compare bids since each contractor might have a different vision.
So it's a trade-off, a more streamlined process in exchange for potentially more risk, kind of like ordering the chef's surprise at a restaurant. Could be amazing, or it could be interesting.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's design responsibility. Who's holding the creative reins on this project?
Who gets to call the design shots?
Exactly. The guide highlights a whole spectrum here, from the client leading the design charge to the contractor taking the helm. And this allocation of design responsibility needs to be crystal clear in that contract.
Clear as glass. Okay, now for the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
How does the contractor actually get paid? I'm guessing there's more than one way to structure that.
You bet. The guide explores several different payment structures. We've talked about the fixed price lump sum. There's also remeasurement, where the final price is determined after the work is done. And then there's target cost, where the client and contractor agree on a target price and then share both the savings and the overruns.
It's all about finding that rhythm for your project's financial heartbeat. Now, what about subcontractors? How much control does the client have over who gets brought onto the team?
That's a really important point. The contract can actually stipulate whether the client gets to nominate those subcontractors or whether that decision rests solely with the main contractor.
So it's like deciding whether you want to handpick every player on your team or give the coach the final say on the roster.
Exactly. And that, my friend, brings us to the often overlooked but oh so important world of contract creation and execution.
Ah, yes, the fine print where all the magic and potential headaches can hide. Welcome back, everyone. We're in the final act of our construction contract deep dive. We've tackled those big picture strategies, the procurement routes, and we've explored those practical considerations for choosing the right approach. But now it's time to unveil the secrets hiding in the fine print.
That's right. We're going to equip you with the knowledge to make sure that your contract is as solid as the structures it governs.
No crumbling foundations here. We're entering what the guide calls the advising level, making sure your contract is legally sound, airtight, no room for loopholes.
Exactly.
Where do we even begin?
Well, it all starts with really understanding what makes a contract legally binding in the first place.
Okay, because I was just going to say, I thought it was as simple as a handshake, maybe sign something on a napkin, we're good to go, right?
You know, those informal agreements, they might work sometimes, but it's never a good idea to tempt fate, especially with something as important and as complex as a construction project.
Right, the stakes are high.
They are, which is why the guide lays out those 5 key elements for a legally binding contract. They are offer, acceptance, consideration, certainty of terms, and the intention to create legal relations.
Okay, so it's a bit more involved than just scribbling something down on a napkin.
It is. And the first two, offer and acceptance, they need to be clear. The contractor is offering their services with specific terms, and the client's accepting those terms without any alterations.
So it's a true meeting of the minds, both on the same page. No room for ambiguity. What about that word consideration? That sounds a bit out of place in a construction contract.
It does sound a bit strange in this context, but it's actually a cornerstone of contract law. Consideration simply means that something of value is being exchanged between the parties.
Okay, so in the world of construction, that would be.
In this case, it's usually money, right? The client's paying for the work that the contractor performs.
Right, makes sense. Payment for services rendered. Okay, now what about those last two elements? Certainty of terms and intention to create legal relations. Those sound a tad intimidating, even for a seasoned pro like me.
They do sound a bit like legal jargon, I'll admit, but they're really pretty straightforward when you break them down. Certainty of terms just means that the contract can't be vague or open to different interpretations.
Well, you don't want to leave anything up for interpretation when it comes to contracts.
Exactly. It needs to be very specific. Define the scope of work, the payment milestones, deadlines. All those nitty-gritty details need to be spelled out.
No wishy-washy language when it comes to these contracts. Got it. And what about that last one, intention to create legal relations? What does that really mean?
It essentially means that both parties are entering into the agreement with the understanding that it's legally binding. They intend to be held accountable for fulfilling their end of the bargain.
This is all about being serious, being committed to that agreement, no takebacks. Now, the guide also mentions that there are some common pitfalls to avoid, even when you're going through all the proper channels of creating these contracts.
Absolutely. The guide emphasizes the importance of those contract particulars, making sure that those are all filled out correctly, all the supporting documents are in order, and above all, avoiding inconsistencies or vague language in the contract. Clarity is key.
Clarity is key. Got to dot your I's and cross your T's. Now, the guide also talks about amending standard contracts. Why would you need to tweak something that's probably been vetted by a team of lawyers?
That's a great question. You know, those standard contracts, they're great starting points. They provide a really good foundation. But the thing is, every single construction project, it's like a snowflake. It's unique. So you might need to make amendments to tailor that risk allocation, maybe add some specific obligations that are unique to your project, or even remove certain rights that don't apply in your situation.
Right, you've got to customize that standard contract to fit your specific project.
Exactly.
But I imagine those amendments should be handled with care, right? You want to make sure you're not accidentally creating loopholes.
You are so right. The guide emphasizes that it's always best to handle those contract amendments with some legal guidance, just to be on the safe side.
Don't try this at home, folks. Leave it to the professionals. Speaking of potential disputes, let's say things do go south on a project. What happens then?
That's why it's so crucial to have really clear dispute resolution mechanisms outlined right there in your contract.
So if something comes up.
You have a plan. It might involve mediation, could be arbitration, or in, let's say, a worst case scenario, litigation. That's always the last resort.
So it's like having that roadmap for navigating disagreements should they arise.
Exactly. Better to have it and not need it than the other way around.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about that moment of truth signing on that dotted line.
Yeah.
What do our listeners need to know to make sure everything's done by the book?
Well, it might seem ceremonial, but that execution of the contract, it's really important. The guide stresses that it needs to be signed by someone who's authorized. All the witnesses, if they're required, need to be there. All those little details matter. It also goes into the difference between executing a contract as a deed versus a simple contract, because there are some legal nuances there that are important to understand.
No signing in invisible ink or using your pet's paw print. Got it. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about liability. Let's say a project's finished, everyone's happy, they're cutting the ribbon. How long is the contractor still on the hook for potential issues?
That's a really important question because what happens if there's a problem later on? That's where those liability periods come in.
Right, because what if something's lurking beneath the surface, you don't find out about it until 5 years later?
That's right. The contract really needs to outline those responsibilities and those timeframes clearly to avoid any confusion or, even worse, legal battles down the line.
So even after that last coat of paint dries,
Yeah,
that contractor, they might still be called back into action.
it's possible. And the last little nugget of wisdom that the guide leaves us with is to always, always be mindful of those jurisdictional considerations.
Right, because what's legal in one country, one state, one county might not be in another.
Exactly. So you always want to make sure that your contract is playing by the rules of the game, the legal landscape where your project is actually taking place.
That's such a crucial point. And with that, my friend, I think we've officially equipped our listeners to confidently navigate the world of construction contracts.
I think so too.
We've journeyed from those high-level strategies to those super granular details of contract creation and execution. It's been quite a ride. But with this knowledge, you're ready to tackle those construction projects with confidence and avoid those contractual pitfalls.
Remember, a well-crafted contract, it's really the bedrock of a successful project. It ensures clarity, it helps you manage risk, and it fosters those strong collaborative relationships.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. Think about how understanding these contract nuances can not only protect your interests, but also open up opportunities for smoother, more collaborative construction journeys. Until next time, everyone, happy building.